Hello and welcome to Geometry with Mr. Clausen. Today we are going to get started on BPP 9, which is the Lumber Estimator activity. And specifically what we're going to do in this activity is look at how to estimate the number of studs that you would need to build a home based on using simple ratios that you would use. So to give you an idea of what a stud is, like when you build a wall and that type of thing, and you have like your door openings and your window openings and that type of thing, there obviously has to be a little bit of structure to your home so that it doesn't topple over or do anything like that. So typically, if you have your 8-foot high walls, you have some of these boards, all right, and obviously those have to be accounted for and purchased and whatnot. But the most common type of board that you're going to have is a 2x4 stud like this. And what's nice about these studs is that if you go to Menards or Home Depot or any other retailer, is you can actually buy all these pre-cut. And that's all we're going to do in this activity today is just figure out, hey, if we have a floor plan like cabin 1 here, how do we determine how many 2x4 studs, both interior and exterior, would we need to go and calculate this out? So with that, on this worksheet, I have down here some of my experiences in doing these estimations and figuring out how to estimate your studs and that type of thing, and a little space down here for you to write down how many 2x6 studs that you need and how many 2x4 studs. Now, this general structure is used for both interior walls and exterior walls, but the main difference that you're going to notice is that with exterior walls, just like you did with BPP3, is that the exterior walls are an 1/8 inch thick on the scale, so they're 6 inches thick. And a big reason for this is not so much for the additional structural stability, but just so you have enough room to pack in the amount of insulation that you should have. And then obviously you see with the interior walls here, they're thinner, you only need a 2x4 stud for your interior walls. So we're going to learn how to calculate both. One of the things that I'll just point out real briefly is that when you're doing 2x4 or 2x6 studs, you usually space them every 16 inches. And a big reason for that is if you're installing like sheetrock or anything like that, they come in these 4-foot by 8-foot sheets. And then if you place these studs every 16 inches from each other, it gives you 4 columns, so to speak, of contact that you can screw and nail down things. And usually that spacing provides plenty of support. Even if these studs were like on the ceiling and you have them spaced every 16 inches, that's going to typically provide you enough stability that you're not going to have sagging and those type of things. All right, and that's just by convention and also from experience when I have cheated as a younger teenager with certain construction projects. So with that said, we're going and we're looking at this, and what we're going to do is just estimate those studs. So what I have on here is that based on previous experience and research, 1 pre-cut stud per linear foot of wall will get you very close to the number of studs that you need for this project. This is what you're going to use for this entire thing. You could try to count every single stud that you would need, including the studs that you would need for like around doors. You can see here that you sometimes need a trimmer stud and on some of these other things, and I find that's really hard to calculate and estimate all that. And you could go and take something like a template like this. You'll see that there is 16 space on center measurements on here, and this is really nice because you can go and plot this right on here. You see that these measurements are a little bit longer than that 1/4 inch per foot, and I can estimate like, hey, I would need, there's 9 16-inch spacings going into 10, so I could go and estimate that I need 11 studs to do this wall, because obviously I need 1 here to start it, and then it's further than 16 inches here, so I need an extra 1 here, and that's going to be pretty accurate for these walls. But if I start going to interior walls and those type of things, technically, if I'm estimating the number of studs that I need, I would hit 7 here, but then, I would need a trimmer stud and all this other stuff in order to get the amount of lumber that I would need. So instead of using this, I mentioned this because that's why this is here. This isn't like, 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot. Like this is 16-inch spacing on center. So you can use it for that. Like that's especially useful, I would say, if you're doing smaller projects and you want a more precise number. But my thought is that if you're doing something like this, you either want a calculation that's going to get you right on the number or just a little over the number. All right. And trust me, contractors, it's my opinion, like if I was a contractor, that if I had a few extra 2x4s, like when I was done with a project, I would prefer having a few extra 2x4s than not having enough, because that means I have to completely stop my work. I have to go back to the store. I got to get more lumber and then come back, and that is a huge waste of time. Like if I have a few boards, like, and even if I want to bring it back to the store, I can bring it back to the store when I'm picking up all the materials for my next job, or maybe just bring it to the next job. If you can do that. Now, obviously, I don't want thousands of boards, but if I have a few extra boards, I usually find that okay. And what I'm going to show you is the method that I typically use that gets me within that model. I've used both this template variation and this method I'm going to teach you now, and usually I'm within 1 or 2 studs of the correct value that I need. And as long as you don't have a boatload of like windows and doors and weird things that might add a few extra studs, this method's always going to come out, at least from my experience of doing this activity, to the relative number of studs that you need. So, all right, I'm rambling a little bit, so I'm going to get started here. So, what I have written on here is that what you want 1 pre-cut stud per linear foot of wall will give you very close to the number of studs that you need for a project. Thus, if you have an 18-foot long wall, you should estimate that you need 18 pre-cut studs. If you have a wall that is 12 foot 4 inches or 12 foot 10 inches, for example, you will always round up your linear foot measurement in this situation, all right? Because you always need to have a stud every 16 inches, right? So even if it's like, 12 foot 1 inch, well, you need to just round it up. You can't have that extra spacing there, otherwise you're going to get yourself into some trouble, because you're not going to have anything to screw into when you're trying to hang that sheet of sheetrock. So always round up to the nearest whole number. And what we're going to do now is work through cabin 1 in this video, and then what I will do is I'll assign a cabin 2 as your homework. So without further ado, let's get started on this floor plan so that you can see this process. Now, with cabin 1 here, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. With cabin 1 here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by just indicating some lengths, estimating number of studs, and those type of things, so that we can get some of this hashed out. So for example, if I go and I measure this wall, I see that this is 16 and a half feet if I go from this wall to this wall. And so what I'm going to do when I go and write this down is, instead of going and writing down the footage that I need, I'm just going to write down the number of studs. Now, if I round 16 and a half to the nearest whole number, that's 17. And so I'm going to write 17 here. And that's going to be the number of 2x6 studs that I need for that wall. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to work my way through this until I get the number of studs that I need. And when you're doing this, I'd like you to show your work on this so I can see your thought process. This helps me keep track of what each wall is, and then I'll go through and how to add all this up to try to avoid any double counting and that type of thing, because that's the easiest way to kind of get some awry numbers and that type of thing. But so now, I've already counted this section of wall, so I'm going to go down here. That's like exactly 3 feet. I'm going to call that 3 studs. We'll go, I've counted that section of wall. That's 12, so I'll say 12 studs. You don't need to double count any walls. Section of walls. So if I go like that, 6 times 4, 24, 25, and a little over. So this is going to be 26, because we're always rounding that up. And let's see here. Again, I've already counted that section. So that's 12. And we'll go here. Now this is a little over 4.5. Oh, actually we could probably say 4 there and be okay with that. This will be 9. And I know there's a little bit of estimation that's going on here, and like I said, just from experience of like going through these methods and counting these, it gets me really close to the number I would have gotten if I manually counted everything. And I find this to be a much simpler method to show the students. If you add an extra stud here and there, you know, if you accidentally include like a little edge over there, I'm not opposed to that. I think, you know, we go here, there's 16. And one of the things I want to point out is that when you have these straight walls, and, you know, I say this is 16 feet, and I start like looking at that and being like, well, no, I only need like 12 or 13. Yes, that is true. But what this calculation accounts for is some of the extra studs you will need to reinforce around windows and doors and those types of things that you have involved with that. So yes, if you use this method, you can go and calculate and that type of thing. But with some of the little overestimation that occurs here, it compensates for things like doors and extra reinforcements that you will need around those things over the long haul of the entire project, which is why I'm showing you this method. All right. So if you're thinking like, well, 16 inches and 12 inches are different, that is true. And like I said, this is just a convention I'm showing you, and this isn't something that I've came up with on my own. I mean, this is a technique that I've read up on and has been a big reason that I've explored it, and the reason I am showing you today. So that's almost 12 feet. So we'll say 12. That's 8. Now for the chimney, I think We'll count this as 1. We'll just go around the outside and call these all exterior studs. Let's go 2. This is 6. This is 2 again. If you said 4 or 5, either of those would be fine. And now what I've just done is I have created a estimation for all the exterior studs. So what you would do at this point is you can, you know, if you want to write with a pen or something as you're kind of counting through and double checking that would be fine. Just to kind of have a convention to go with there. But what I typically would do in this situation now is I would add that 17. And then add that 3. Let's go and add that 12, 26, 12, 4, 9, 4, 16, 12, 8, and then we'll go 2 plus 6 plus 2 plus 5, and I get 138 studs. And this is worth double checking actually just through the course of making this video. I accidentally entered a couple of times, just going through that number. So it's worth double checking and making sure you get that confirmation, because that's usually what's going to cause an error, is usually like your calculator. Maybe if you have something other than your phone, maybe you have a calculator where you can actually type in the entire number and you can visually see all of your entries. That's a nice way to kind of make sure that everything's in place. Easy and writing on this other sheet that I have. But once you calculate this for cabin 2, what you will do is write the 181 here. All right. And like I said, this is going to be a little bit of an overestimation. If you were actually the nitty-gritty, go through everything, and that's fine. You know, if you are looking at this and trying to figure out, you know, what estimation that I'm looking for. I mean, I'm trying to remember what I typically do for this. I think I usually allow like 2.5 to 5% error as far as these calculations go. I give you some flexibility with that. And so when you're going and calculating this out, if you accidentally say 4 instead of 5, or you accidentally round up with all of these by one stud, right, there's probably not enough walls where a 5% error is going to get you in a lot of trouble, whether it's positive or minus 5%. Okay, so we're looking for this as a estimation tool. So keep that in mind. So unless you accidentally like double count a big number or something like that, you're going to be within a 5% error. I'll just go on record now saying 5%. Now let's do the interior walls here as far as, you know, this calculation goes. So if we go and we look at, you know, that's 7. Again, I'm going to say 2 because I've already counted that wall. This is 7. This is 12. I'll also say that's 12 because that's the same thing. This is 1. I mean, we can go and measure that, but I can tell that's less than 1/4 inch. I think this is a 5 foot by 8 foot bathroom, so that's 5. That's exactly 6. And I mean, even if I subtract that a little bit, it's still going to need to round up to 6. That'll be 7. That'll be 2. And that is all of the interior walls in this given building. So obviously something that you want to avoid here is accidentally double counting any walls. And, you know, again, like just like I did with the previous exterior wall calculation, make sure you're double counting these interior wall calculations as well. I'm noticing even just going through, I should probably use a different calculator, something where I can actually physically see the entries. So it's very easy to kind of accidentally double count something, which I did in my previous cut. So if you're seeing things kind of cutting in and out, I'm just making sure that I'm showing you how to calculate all this correctly. But if we go and start doing all these walls now, we'll go 7. And usually I just start in one spot and work my way across. 7, 14, 2, 12, 1, 5, 12, 6, 2, 7. And what you'll notice here is that we will need 61 studs. So just like with the exterior walls, what you will do once you do this for cabin 2, you don't start writing in all the stuff here as like for cabin 1, because cabin 2 is going to be a little different from cabin 1. What you'll do is you'll individually do all these calculations. You'll put the interior studs here, your 2x4 studs for cabin 2. So you'll have to do the same calculation for cabin 2 as we did for cabin 1 in this video. And then the exterior walls here. Put this in. Make sure your name's on it. And then you'll submit it. And with that said, hopefully this video gave you a really nice quick rundown of how to do these calculations, some things to keep in mind. It's worth taking a second to double check, because that 5% error is really going to get blown out of proportion really quickly with one minor calculator error or accidentally double counting something. So be mindful of that, because that's the real world too, right? Like if you accidentally add or multiply by 12 instead of adding by 12 or something like that, and you order all that, I mean, that's real life. So the attention to detail and double checking your numbers and those type of things is worth doing. So with that said, let's do some math.